Gishunge was here from 2018, if I'm not wrong.
People don't miss bullets. Bullets miss people.
This attack was purely planned through Facebook.
You'd want as much intelligence as possible. And you'd want to get in the region where you're doing a lot of dynamic risk assessment for them and you're constantly being on top of things.
A day before the attack, you get the facilitators running away. So when the attack is live, they are crossing the borders. We had the SWAT team, defusing or neutralizing the attackers. Obviously that led to recovery of firearms, grenade unexploded, cartridges, clearing the scene. I found all those things packaged.
In order for us to defeat terrorism, then we have to defeat this networking.
On the morning of January 15th, 2019, Kenyans were still easing into the new year. Some were recuperating from the expenses of sending their children back to school, while others were busy drafting their resolutions and plans for the months ahead. But as the clock ticked away into the afternoon toward the evening rush hour, unbeknownst to many, a meticulously planned attack by the Al-Shabaab terror group was about to unfold at DusitD2, a high-end commercial complex popular among Westerners in Riverside. Leading this assault was Ali Salim Gishunge, the son of a Kenya Defense Forces officer, a young man brutal and full of hate. What set a young Gishunge on a path of cruelty and self-destruction remains a puzzle hitherto. The other attackers were Siat Omar, Osman Ibrahim, an identified attacker, and Mahir Riziki, a known associate of slain radical preacher Sheikh Abu Drogo. Riziki had previously been arrested at Sakina Mosque before fleeing to Tanzania and then to Somalia. By the time security forces neutralized the attackers, 21 innocent lives had been lost and several others injured. The job was now squarely on security agencies and detectives to try and piece together details of the motive, the planners and facilitators of this horrific attack. Through court testimony, KTN can begin to put together what intelligence services and the police believe happened in the planning and execution of the terrorist attack. The story of how the attack came to be starts in the early 90s in Isiolo County, where two young men, Ali Salim Gishunge and another, Cholo Abdi Abdullah, were born. The two go about their childhood just like any other child. They join school and clear primary and their secondary education. Gishunge wanted to be a journalist, but since his parents had separated and the mother could not afford to take him to school, he opted to do other jobs. He got employed as a cyber cafe attendant, and this is where police believe he was recruited and left the country in 2015 to join Al-Shabaab in Somalia. On the other hand, Cholo's activities are not yet known by the police, but he left his home to study journalism at a leading university in Nairobi, and then from there he went missing. Police believe he too was radicalized around the same time with Gishunge before they left for Somalia. In Somalia, the two joined other recruits, among them Rashid Mwalimu and Mahir Riziki. While taking their training, intelligence sources say that from their group of recruits, Gishunge, Cholo and Mwalimu stood out and were given different tasks to carry out and were to join Abdimajid Hassan, who, even though older than them, he too had a role to play in the attacks that the terror group was planning. First in the list was Cholo and Mwalimu, who were sent to the Philippines in the year 2016, where they were to undergo aviation training to carry out aviation attacks. According to court filings in the US, Cholo started researching how to hijack a commercial airline, as well as watching Al-Qaeda propaganda material and how to crash an airplane into a building. Second on the list to be dispatched was Abdimajid Hassan Adan, who was to carry out an attack here in the country. According to court records, with the help of Victor Odede, who is a cousin to confessed terrorist Elgiva Bwire Oliacha, the two collected information on the Kenyatta International Convention Center, KICC. Sources say they may have set their eyes on KICC, but they had scouted several other targets. So elaborate and well-planned was this foiled attack that Odede, using Facebook, would communicate with a man in Somalia on how the security arrangement at KICC was and what was the best route to use. This mysterious man that intelligence and police believe is based in Jilib then directed Odede to drive a motorcycle from Nairobi to Moyale and back, and then take the same trip using a bus to scout and see the kind of security checks, including roadblocks that the police had put up. After this, Abdimajid then bought a Toyota Mark X car here in the country and drove to El Ade, Somalia, where it was fixed with a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device or VBID. And when they were driving back into the country, the vehicle could not make it due to the terrain, which led them to get a second vehicle, a Mitsubishi Outlander. After getting back into the country, Abdimajid and several other terrorists were cornered by police on February 2018 in Merti, Isiolo County, as they drove towards the capital Nairobi, where the plan was to drive the vehicle into KICC. Police also recovered 5 AK-47s, projectiles, grenades, and 36 fully loaded magazines. According to bomb experts, the explosion would have been lethal and would have affected City Hall, Supreme Court, Office of the President, and the 2 Houses of Parliament. After the KICC attack was foiled, Gishunge, who was to complete the other plan, was spotted at different places, including the 2 Rivers Mall, where it is believed he was scouting for an attack. Police believe that the intelligence that had been collected by Al-Shabaab to facilitate the KICC attack is the same that they used to carry out the DusitD2 attack. While Abdi Majid and his accomplices were arrested, Gishunge had already been assimilated in the country.
Gishunge was here from 2018, if I'm not wrong.
He had been residing at Moshadha in Kiambu, where he is said to have been putting together an elaborate plan for his mission. It was during this time that he met his would-be wife and jihadi bride Violet Kemunto.
Basi tumemkabidhi Faruk mtoto wetu, na ametuahidi atamchunga, atampatia furaha. Mtoto wetu hatakuwa na huzuni hata siku moja yote.
ATN's Crimes and Investigations Desk has exclusively obtained this footage of their wedding.
Mimi nitapatia tu mjomba ajulishe sisi kwa watu.
Yeah, they did a very big Islamic wedding and invited, apparently, interestingly, Salim Gishunge, alias Farouk, invited, the family members of Kemunto. We never had anyone from his side. He comes from Isiolo.
As the time went by towards the day of the attack, the 2 are said to have had a good time, visiting several places, including flying to the coastal region for a holiday. Days to the attack, Gishunge and his accomplices visited the 2 Rivers Mall, and police believe they were carrying out a recce. His accomplices also visited the DusitD2 complex for a dry run of the attack. A day to the attack, the men visited several places. 2 men, among them Riziki, also visited the Dusit using a taxi, a Honda Fit, registration number KCK, and left using a Toyota Fielder, registration number KBU.
Ordinarily, what they do is that they would have either 4 or 5 choices. So they can have KICC, they can have the Parliament, they can have the High Court or Supreme Court, they can have Dusit, they can have Westgate, and then settle on the one that is easier in terms of security checks.
On the day of the attack, the 3 men visited the 2 Rivers Mall, where Gishunge made several purchases for their last supper. The men are emotional, knowing this could be their last day on earth in this video spread by Al-Kataib, Al-Shabaab's propaganda wing.
There are promises of a better job, for Violet in Somalia or whatever it was, I don't know. And that's how now I convinced her to leave, because she left on 12th.
Before Kemunto left for Somalia, days before the attack, Gishunge sold some of his household items and even sent some of them via parcels while the 2 kept in touch.
So things were packaged and sent to Mandera, and she went to Mandera. So the last communication was in Mandera, crossing over to Bulahawa.
On the day of the attack, Riziki, who came in using a taxi, KBR, was supposed to blow himself up in the secret garden restaurant to invite the other attackers who were coming from the main gate. But he messed up. He blew himself outside the restaurant, which led to most people fleeing the scene.
Dusit, they were prepared, they knew, because we do sensitization and all that. We take them through, to make sure that in case of an emergency, self-awareness, being cautious of your environment and all that. They had the back exit that leads to apartment over the river. That is what saved probably 1,000 or so people.
When his colleagues came, they found few people who were left in the complex. These are the 4 attackers led by Ali Salim Gishunge as they hit the DusitD2 complex, where they are shooting indiscriminately at anything that moves. After the attackers were neutralized, police recovered this love letter from Gishunge that he had written for his lover Kemunto, but it is not exactly known how she would have seen it. The letter reads, and I quote, "Assalamu alaikum love. Sasa babe, I hope you are fine. If you get this, maybe nimepata shahada, or I am in the process. It pains me to leave you, but I love meeting with Allah as well. Babe, sorry for everything. Forgive me, and if Allah wishes, we shall meet once again in Jannah." End of quote. The police also recovered a fake ID that had Siyat Omar's image, and they later realized that it had been used to make another fake ID that was recovered when Abdi Majid was arrested in Merti, Isiolo County. While this was happening, Cholo was still in his mission while sending information back to his handler in Somalia. He was, however, arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation's FBI in July 2019 after carrying out a probe of his online activity where he sought information about the 9/11 attack carried out by Al-Qaeda, as well as information about how to hijack a commercial aircraft and also how to crash it into a tall building. His arrest came 6 months after the DusitD2 attack, after the FBI found out that he had been in communication with Gishunge, and a man who was also found to have communicated with Gishunge and who authorities believe was their handler back in Somalia. Cholo was in November 2024 indicted on all the 6 charges relating to terrorism and is set to be sentenced on March 10th this year. On the other hand, his colleague and fellow jihadist Rashid Mwalimu went missing after Cholo's arrest, and it is not yet known whether he is in the Philippines or he came back to Africa. Here in Kenya, the DCI have already issued an alert calling for anyone with information that may lead to his arrest to volunteer it. Regarding how the police responded to the attack, Byron Adera, a former Special Forces officer in the army, says inasmuch as Kenya has not been in its A game in past attacks, the way they responded to the Dusit attack showed some improvement.
When you brought people under that umbrella, the multi-agency setup, then it means that communication-wise was also really optimized for excellence. So then that was DusitD2. A number of reasons as well for the successes thereof. Apart from speed of action, what we'd call mobilization potential was there. But beyond that, the target itself was hardened. And you can attribute this to the fact that even the security was on the ground and the security programs kicking in that day within that setup were really okay.
He says that the Reiki squad and the police in general did a commendable job of neutralizing the 4 attackers, adding that Kenyans came together for their own by providing information that turned out to be quite credible intelligence.
You'd want as much intelligence as possible, and you'd want to get into the region where you're doing a lot of dynamic risk assessment for them, and you're constantly being on top of things, and practice a lot of initiatives. So any information that's flying left and center, back and forth, it gets into some funnel, and people just use it for relevance, and whatever can actually be putting that team on the ground to do an excellent job and have an edge over the other guy is still very vital.
He points out that despite the police coming out in big numbers, some of the private firearm holders who were spotted at the complex may have unknowingly put their lives in danger.
So it's not when you are home and you jump out and say, oh, you could be putting yourself or your own life at risk inadvertently. But we saw that. But if it finds you within the theater, like we saw on DusitD2 and we also saw on Westgate, quite a few individuals who have been exposed, and some of them have that military or police background, those ones are okay.
According to Adera, if faced with a terror attack, the responses range from running, hiding, or fighting. But he adds that communication is key to help authorities know where to look for survivors.
Times when you're up and close to the threat, and you know these guys are coming in to take no prisoners. They're coming in to mow people down. They're coming in for mass casualty. You're better off fighting against that threat. No amount of desperation is going to save you as well. So you could as well be better off starting with a fight. But you find yourself, and as we say, you know, people don't miss bullets. Bullets miss people. So if you had a gunfire or had a crack, which is a bullet moving through the air, go past you, you're alive. At that particular point in time, the best would be to find the best route out, run away from that danger. But the running is also very, very important to be considered again, is the very fact that if you're running and you haven't located where the threat is coming from, then you could as well be running towards the threat.
The National Counter-Terrorism Center is credited for the kind of response that Kenyans and the world saw at the Dusit attack compared to the 2014 terrorist attack on the Garissa University or the 2013 attack on the Westgate shopping mall. According to Fred Ndegwa, who is in charge of partnerships at NCTC, they have been at the center of the fight against terror, adding that their support mainly focuses on the aftermath.
This center invests significantly in providing psychosocial support to families, including spouses and children of people that have either crossed over into theaters or people that have been radicalized and are in prison, primarily to address the psychosocial needs of those families and those communities, but also to prevent them from being vulnerable to radicalization and recruitment.
From his assessment, Kenya is a safe haven, but the threat of terrorism is always lurking in the shadows.
We have, for the most part, successfully contained that threat. We have ensured that there are no active cells within this country. We have also ensured that we do not suffer significant attacks. Terrorist groups are constantly planning. They constantly have us on their crosshairs, but because of a lot of the effort that has been put in place by law enforcement agencies, those threats have not manifested. But also importantly, the Kenyan people have together agreed that terrorism has no place in this society.
He points out that from the normal issues that may have been attributed to the rise of terrorism cases and violent extremism, there's a new battleground that is on the horizon.
Looking into the future, we are looking at emerging challenges such as climate change and the vulnerability that causes. We are looking at new and emerging technologies that can be exploited for terrorism and violent extremism. We are looking at unmoderated and unregulated virtual spaces that are then used to spread extremist narratives. We are looking at violent extremist groups morphing into different things. Currently we have a lot of religious ideologies being exploited. So it's likely that in future we shall have a lot of political ideologies as well. We shall have a lot of social issues being exploited for radicalization and recruitment.
3 men were arrested and arraigned in court over facilitating this attack. One of them, Mire Abdullahi, admitted to all charges that the state had preferred against him, and he entered a plea bargain with the state. The second one is Hussein Abdile, who the police say was used by the terrorists to make fake identification cards as well as birth certificates, had his defense hearing concluded. The third is Muhammad Abdi Ali, who the police say was key in facilitating this attack through the movement of money from Somalia to the terrorists, has his defense scheduled for 18th and 22nd of this month. The bloody DusitD2 attack remains one of Kenya's darkest chapters, a day when ordinary lives were shattered in an instant. Families lost loved ones, survivors carry invisible scars, and a nation still mourns. But in the midst of tragedy, there is resilience. The pain has not faded, but neither has the determination to fight back. Kenya's security teams remain vigilant, learning, adapting, and standing guard. Fred Kagonye, KTN.